I'll switch you out. Yeah.
I'm not sure why I kissed you that night, but I think it's because I'd run out of options. My mind was too busy running for its life, and my stomach was preoccupied with twisting itself into balloon animals, so all I could pay attention to was flesh. Cold, pale skin glowing in the night as the moon shone through those low trees, casting inconsistent shadows that made us look like we cut ourselves into pieces small enough to eat as sacraments. And your cheeks were soft and warm and innocent, like a sheep just before it is slaughtered. I watched you grow, watched your brown twiggy arms as they gnarled themselves into limbs, watched the shade of your face change when the first stages of manliness began to plant their dark seeds into your cheeks, watched as your hair became long and winding vines, stretching itself into impossibly beautiful yarns like the ones you would tell us when we and the boys would sneak off in secret, get just far enough outside the city to howl like the wolves that we were, drunk on more wine than any of us could remember bringing, and then we'd collapse around the bonfire in fits of laughter, our bodies creating sandstorms as they ride. But once we dust devils had settled, we'd always look to you for a story. You spoke of your imaginary world with such eloquence that we couldn't help but wish one day we'd end up there. It was on one of those nights that we managed to fall into each other. We both heard the call of gravity, but found the right answer in each other's arms instead. And long after your eyelids had thrown in the towel, my fingertips were still listening to the braille whispers in your whiskers. But you were the center of everyone's focus in those days. And the way you were able to make something mystical out of even the most mundane gave a whole new meaning to turning tricks, but I stuck with you. Even when you decided to take your show on the road, you were a superstar, and the crowds grew large enough you asked me if I could start handling your finances. It was the only romantic thing you ever said. But as the years went on, you grew more distant. And any alone time I could get with you was nothing short of a miracle. And I didn't understand, because what you seemed to be saying was make love, not war. And all I wanted was one chance to let you practice what you preach, because these crowds, they're only with you conditionally. And you were never too good at distinguishing the difference between cries for an encore. In your own head, I came to you one night, asked you if this was your ideal life, told you I'd been skimming some off the top for a while and we could retire off what I'd saved. You told me you felt betrayed, to never speak to you again. So, Jesus, I turned you over. But only because I hope that you'll see the light, that when they ask you if the accusations are true, you'll deny it, and you'll be released with nothing more lost than a few pints of blood and some pride, and then we'll run by two strong black horses and right up into the sunset in search of a place where these storytellers will never make metaphors of either of our names, and if not, if I find out I've condemned you to death, I swear to you, I'm gonna find the tallest tree I can, and maybe if I just take a leap of faith, I can find one noose that will hold me the way I have forever wished that your arms could. Yours forever, Judas. What is a good story? How do you tell it? Why should you tell it? And why should you tell it? Let's back up. What is a story? A narrative, either true or fictitious in prose or verse, designed to interest, amuse, or instruct the audience. So, a TED Talk is a story. How you got here is a story. The ship of Theseus is a story. Theseus, son of Poseidon, captained a ship of 30 oars across his father's ocean. As the boat became older, the boards began to break, and one by one would need to be replaced. Every nail, every slat, every mast from forward to aft, until nothing of the original vessel remained. So, was it still the same ship that had initially set sail? You change skin cells about every 27 days. Taste buds regenerate every 10. You get a new liver each 150 nails. Every few months, bones each 10 years. So what makes you the same you in those baby photos your parents pull out to embarrass you? The same you that fought your way out of the womb and then loved and lost and learned your way into this moment in this room or on YouTube. And what if you're the only you? What if he and she and me are nothing like you? What if we're all robots, or your dreams, or part of the Matrix, or secret agent dinosaurs in immensely convincing human costumes here to study and eat you? What would you do? How would you keep on living and fight the sad and the lonely, the swallowing maw of your own solipsism if you thought that you were the only person? You couldn't. I couldn't. We couldn't. What if we are our stories? Our essence, in essence, defined by the ever-present singular narrative position of I. What if I then told you a story? My story. If my story, even though it wasn't your story, was able to make you feel things that you'd only felt before because of your story, would that maybe convince you that I'm a story too? A you. And that there's never a moment you've been through that I can't at least relate to. And it follows, if I'm a you, then you should treat me like I'm a you. And unless you tell me otherwise, I'll treat you like you're a me too, because if you didn't, if you were to hurt me, you would be able to empathize through your story. So hopefully, we can punch each other in the face a lot less. Or at least could set really strict rules for when it's okay to punch someone in the face, or to find ways to keep them from bringing more pain into others' stories, while never forgetting that we are each still stories too. And thus it is that we have solved the problems of personal permanence, solipsism, and invented morality, all by defining ourselves as stories. But that's just the first step. Next, we go find more yous and me's that we could also be when they tell us our stories. And after we share stories, we begin to realize a few things. First, what makes a good story is how much it evokes our empathy. When we look at it, how much of our own story we can see. And second, there are certain themes and characters our stories seem to share. So now with these pieces in place, we can learn how to make up stories that we can all relate to. So how do we tell them well? Well, by experimenting and finding out what works best for each audience. So maybe we go out and create great narratives of triumph and tragedy and invent ways to capture them and show them to all of our friends and their friends and their friends and their friends. And then we get on the internet and can talk to someone on the other side of the world about how every time I watch Empire Strikes Back and I see Han Solo about to be encased in carbonite and Princess Leia says, "I love you," and he says, "I know, my everything feels like a John Williams brass section, and so does yours, and so does theirs, and suddenly we are all being human together." Or what if every Sunday we put on our fancy clothes and we talk about the same story? Like maybe the one about a child sent from the heavens to the earth who spent his life performing miracles to help the people around him, eventually died to save everyone on our planet, and then came back from the dead to do even greater things. And maybe you were talking about Superman. And maybe you were talking about Goku from Dragon Ball Z, and maybe a bunch of other people were talking about someone else too, but it wouldn't matter. What matters is that through this shared experience, we would all see more and more people as thinking and feeling beings, and we would build our storytelling ability and expand our sphere of empathy, increasing it exponentially each time we engaged in any activity that forces us to see each of our fellow beings as stories. And maybe we make up the word entertainer for someone who's really good at telling stories. Maybe we call them artists when we want to pay them. And maybe they get together and collaborate and learn from one another the best way to make their stories resonate, which is a great thing, so long as they still allow all of us to participate. But maybe they've begun to tell their stories so well, they start to alienate some stories. to argue over which ones have artistic value and which are too accessible and commonplace. And maybe, on the other end of the spectrum, the internet provides you with menial news stories every second, a constant flood of empathy spam begging for your attention. Maybe we become so inundated with updates from Facebook and Tumblr and Twitter and Pinterest, in addition to art becoming so pretentious that it alienates the individual, that you begin to think everyone else is telling their story. Why should mine matter? And this is our problem. The preacher and the politician and the pretentious poet at some point got so caught up in telling their own stories they forgot that the whole reason we started telling them at all was for everyone, was for the audience of all of our fellow beings to remember that their stories are just as important, because the goal of storytelling and art, by extension, must always be empathy. Must always be understanding, must be a radical connection between us. The website Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows gives us a new word for this: sonder. Sonder is the realization that each random passerby is living a life as vivid and complex as your own, populated with their own ambitions, friends, routines, worries, inherited craziness, an epic story that continues invisibly around you like an anthill, sprawling deep underground with elaborate passageways to thousands of other lives that you will never know existed, in which you might appear only once, as an extra sipping coffee in the background, a blur of traffic passing on the highway, or a lighted window at dusk. You remember Theseus' ship and your skin. Both are ever-changing, both made of the same organic compound, which before it was you was stars and will be again, but in between them, it's you and it's me, and we are here on this planet in this time, and there may not even be a why to it all, but there is, so far as we know, only one proven way to keep from doing it alone. Only one way to build an empathetic bridge, one way to keep in mind that you are alive in the same way that all of your fellow human beings is, and now you know that secret. It's you. You as a story. You are our only hope. You are our salvation. Your story, and telling it, is the only way that the rest of us will remember to consider every other story as complex and full of value as our own. You are the ever-shifting, empathetic vessel through which a myriad of your fellow beings will seek safe passage and ask you to give the same in return as we together sail in search of Sonder. And you, as a human, will pass on. But you, as a story, will be passed on, passed down, with each telling one board, one word, one piece slightly different or replaced. Eventually, even your name will fade away, but your essence, the most human part of you, the one that gives all of us hope, will be there for long beyond where you can. Daughter, the first time you asked me why I worked in such a tall building, I told you it was because I worked in the cloud factory. That every fluff and puff you ever laid in the yard and watched morph into ducks and rabbits and unicorns was my doing. I told you I had a typewriter that produced a wisp with each keystroke, and after I'd authored each one's bio, I'd bundle the bits into one light, fluffy package and give them a subtle nudge past the glass, just to get them going. And as my silken children soared, I imagined their jet streams served as kite strings, carrying me along on flights of fancy as I daydreamed, wishing that I could find some way to fly. But today, I looked outside to find an airplane checking its reflection in our building. Its twin turbines staring straight into the pane of our glassy eyes like it was looking for the answers to questions left unspoken, and for a moment it sat completely frozen, framed by a clear New York morning, a silent September sky, completely free of clouds. The shockwave swallowed sound. Even now the clang of steel on steel reverberates from our eardrums down through our vertebrae as the smoke slowly lumbers its way up the staircase, coming to show us why people always imagine the dead head up to the clouds. We covered our mouths, first out of horror, and then to breathe. Our skin has begun to blister, and some of us have resigned ourselves to becoming cinders. Our tear ducts, the only pieces of us still putting up a fight, but that's not how I will die. I refuse to go out like a wax tower with a lit wick, just slow burning down to an inevitable flickering end like my life has been wasted. I won't just wait for asphyxiation. I will escape this steel cage, and amidst the snowstorm of papers, I will take this final chance to decide what my fate is. So, daughter, please do not remember me as whatever impression gravity makes of Picasso with the brushstrokes of my bones against concrete. Instead, compress good memories into crayons. Give them names like grass blazed between our toes green and sky canvas blue, and use them to paint me beautiful, paint me wonderful, paint me in shades of rainbows and clouds and whatever else flies high and with enough power to hold up the two ends of your mouth so that the sound of my name will never make them fall into a frown when you feel weak. Draw me like I'm a kindergarten turkey so you always know I'm in your hands reaching when you need strength. Paint me like I'm a Da Vinci flying machine, or like I was made with wings of steel and a heart so strong even an army of men armed to the teeth with box cutters trying to come crashing through your dreams will never take you down. And sing for me, daughter. With your voice, paint my name in the silence. Let the notes soar through the sky till they find me. And remember, although we all go from ashes to ashes, not all of us fall down. Not all of us fall down, daughter. Some of us jump.